Hello and welcome to Scarritt Bennett Center's Java and Justice podcast. I am Reverend Kelli X, the Director of Racial Justice Ministries here, and I am happy to be joined with Reverend Dori Gorman, who is the chaplain for actually all of the Y of Middle Tennessee. And before we get into talking about what brings us here on today, I wanted you to share, what are you doing and why do you do it?
Well, asking me that question, what do you do? I kind of go like, oh gosh, I do mothering, I do caring, I do preaching, I do running. I don't know, I do lots of things. But when it comes to my role as a chaplain at the YMCA, a lot of staff care, a lot of mental health support, as well as spiritual health if we have staff or members who would like support in their spiritual lives as well. And I get to be friends with you. I get to do friendship and do conversations. So, and why do I do it? Man, you're getting deep fast. I think I do it because I don't know another way to do life. I don't really do surface well, so I'm in a profession that really, I would say, applauds or wants you to go deep, and it's always a growing field. So I always want to be stretched, and I always want to be growing and improving. And so I think that's why I do just about everything I do. I mean, motherhood's that too. Yeah. So I think one of my favorite quotes, I can't even give credit because I heard it and I don't know where, but if you can be confident in one thing, be confident in your ability to learn. So I would like to say, among all the things I do, that if it was said of me, she does learning well, then I'd be good with that.
Oh, that's good.
What do you do?
Why do you do it? And why do I do it? I am the Director of Racial Justice Ministries here at Scarritt Bennett Center. I am a pastor. I pastor the Village Church in Madison, Tennessee. I am a mom. I'm a wife. I'm a friend, hopefully a good friend. I can be better. I can get a little to myself sometimes. And I do all of it, actually all of it, even the pastoring piece, because I desire for people to feel love. To know that they are loved, to know that they're a part of community and that the community cares for them. And so my racial justice work is just as a disciple of Christ, the part of the denomination, like the table is very important in our denomination. And so to be able to make sure that everyone has a seat at the table, but not just a seat, but has access to everything on the table, both to receive, but also that they have gifts, skills, and talents to then give. And so oftentimes when it comes to issues around race or homophobia or sexism or any type of ism that we can come up with, oftentimes folks either don't have access to the table, and when they're at the table, no one's asking them for anything. And so I think there's something to be said about a give and take type of relationship. And so that's why I do what I do, to let people know that they are welcome, they are loved, and they have value. Yeah.
I love that. I'm gonna steal your answer. So.
But if I could learn, that's good. I like that too as well. And so we are here today because Reverend Dori and I are about to do something that I've been wanting to do for a while now, and that is a book study on this book, My Grandmother's Hands, Racialized Trauma and the Pathways to Mending Our Hearts and Bodies by Resmaa Menakem. I said his name correctly. Right. I did it good. Resmaa Menakem. He is a social worker, licensed social worker, a therapist, amazing work that he does. Actually, interesting, his work started really doing couples work. He's also did trauma therapy for within the military. So time in Afghanistan and all of that, that's where he learned about trauma in the body. And as he dealt with his own post-traumatic history of being, what it means to just be in a war zone, literally war zone, repeatedly and learned how to then deal with that trauma in his body, he made the connection between that trauma and the trauma that all people experience, not just Black people, not just people of color, experience because of racism, and how to then metabolize that trauma in order to build a better community. So yeah, so we're here to talk about this book today, and to talk about this book study that we're hoping that we're going to be doing over the next couple of months here at Scarritt. When did you first hear about this book?
So I was trying to remember. I know it was in a podcast. So here I am. I've already given like a quote that I can't say who did it. And I'm talking about a podcast that I don't know who did it. Maybe it'll keep me humble. Maybe no one will remember this who did this podcast. But no, it was in a podcast, and Resmaa was being interviewed. And then as a part of the podcast, I told you about Chadwick Boseman. They had played a clip of Chadwick Boseman singing "My Grandma's Hands," and it was so powerful. I mean, that got my attention in the podcast. And I was like, I love this song, and now I'm hearing the late Chadwick Boseman sing it, and it was just really, really powerful. And then I think in addition, during it, what really got my attention was, and this may go into kind of what stood out to me, but was the combination of racism and your body. And I just had never really heard anyone talk about what racism does to a white body, to a Black body, to police bodies, and in an in-depth way. And so that really grabbed my attention. And so I very quickly ordered the book and read it, and now really think it could be more powerful to read with others.
Yeah. I heard about it actually from the former Director of Racial Justice Ministries here at Scarritt Bennett Center, Reverend Resmaa John Marie, and we were just talking and laughing and, normal conversation, and some kind of way I talked about, how's your time over here? And she said she was reading this book and saying that it's about trauma. And I too had not heard about racism being having trauma on the body. Like, I understood the traumas that happen as a result of racial or racist incidents, but not that racism itself.
Right.
Because the way that it has always been explained is that it is as much of a social construct as race is, and that it's an ideology, and it's something we have to think our way out of and plan. And if I read enough, I study enough, and I know enough information, then I can end racism, I can at least not be racist or be anti-racist, and others, as we learn more information, can do the same. And this book says, yes, you need to learn about it, and no, that's not the only way that we can do that. And so it was interesting.
Yeah, I think the idea of practicing anti-racism, I think I've always seen that as something external.
Yes.
When I'm with others, how I behave, how I show up in a space, who I notice, who I center, all of those things. And this was the first time that practicing anti-racism actually begins in my body, and what practices I am doing, and some of the practices he has in the book to connect with your body.
Right.
That was just really, really, I don't know, really powerful. I don't know.
Right. Yeah, I agree. Because like when I think about there are a couple of, so talk about the book. One of the things that's great about this book, like there's history, there's like intellectual things that are happening, historical knowledge that didn't have before, but also there are these things in every chapter called body practices, and these body center practices, and it's grounding, and it feels initially very, I don't know, kind of hippie.
Yeah, I almost felt like I'm gonna skip this part and get on to the mind to learn more.
Yeah, I'm gonna read one. I don't even know what chapter this is. The first chapter, your blood, your body. I think that's the first chapter. Chapter 1. And so on page 24, it says, take a moment to ground yourself in your body. Notice the outline of your skin and the slight pressure of the air around it. Experience the firmer pressure of the chair, bed, or couch beneath you, or the ground or the floor beneath your feet. And I'm like, okay.
All right, I feel the chair. Let's move on.
I feel that. I mean, like I remember taking like this health class and having to do these things where put my feet on the floor and sit aligned, and I just hadn't thought about it in that way. I have though recognized that the way that I have been able to progress as a Black woman in this world, and that my ancestors and those around me, that there are spiritual practices that kept us grounded, that helped me to believe that I was still valuable in the midst of a place that said that Blackness is not valuable, that Black women are not beautiful, like all of the things. Like I do remember what it's like to be in a church setting to do that. But what's interesting about this book is that he takes both grounding and meditative pieces, and then to kind of help us to just know what it's like to listen to our bodies and what we feel. And so beyond that, I think in this one, talks about, do you experience any fear in your body? If so, where? How does it manifest? As tightness or painful radiance? As a dead hard spot? And so in this one, he doesn't talk about race at all, but it's just, what are you feeling? Because the chapter has talked about some heavy things. And just in reading and experience that, your body does something different. And so, and then the book says, don't skip over them. And you try to skip, I try to skip over it, but I find myself regularly coming back to it.
I even enjoyed the concept of this practice is a part of remembering, and he like hyphenates that, remembering, like not just the literal members of your body, your arms and legs need to be remembered, but your ancestors, your stories, all of that, how do you put them back together, if you will, kind of remember them together. So it was, it's a phenomenal book. I'm curious for you, what's the thing, was there anything that you, like, man, I was blown away by that?
I think there were a couple of things. The two things that kind of come to me. The first one is him talking about the trauma that white people experienced before they came to this country. And that it is that trauma that informed the trauma that then was, as he would say, blown through the bodies of Native people and African Americans. And so like chapter 4, European trauma and the invention of whiteness, but also body and generations of chapter 3 and 4. What he says is that that during what is called the Dark Ages and different things like that, that white folks experienced a lot of trauma, like in Europe. Different groups of people, whether if you were part of the monarch, you could then do with peasants or those lower than you however they wanted to. And oftentimes they use forms of torture as punishment and as a way to keep people in line. So if you know that if you do something big or small, depending on what it is, that you could be put on the rack and your limbs could be ripped from your body, you're probably not going to behave. You know, you're not going to go against what the king says. And if these become normal ways of behaving, and if those are done in public, then you fear, you're afraid. Hence, why people would say, you know what, I need religious freedom. I'm going to leave this place and move across an ocean to a place I've never seen before and live there. However, if you don't deal with what's making you run, when you encounter people who may not actually have any intention to harm you,
but you're afraid.
You will then harm.
Yes.
And you will then say it is their fault. And it's like, wait a minute. And so as a result of doing this time and time again, that there was a trauma that was built into white bodies that then provide a better understanding of how we get into this situation of within this hierarchy of whiteness that didn't exist.
Right.
Like there was not whiteness. We were just a part of your own group.
Yeah.
But then, well, we need to figure out how to create it so that other people, we can get the money, essentially.
Right.
But yeah, and so like creating this system that then demonizes other people, keeps us safe, and all of that to maintain the system. And that was really interesting to me because it actually provided me some space for empathy. Because like, yeah, if I'm afraid and I encounter people who are very different from me, and the way that I've been taught to deal with difference is to destroy it,
right,
then of course I'm going to destroy it. Because if I don't destroy it, what I've been taught that is that it will destroy me. So that makes, it makes sense. It doesn't make it right.
No.
It does not.
Doesn't justify it.
Doesn't justify it at all, but it makes some sense. And it also provides a place or point to which, oh, okay, that's how, I understand how we can fix something like
right.
that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that was mind-blowing to me because I see that on like a micro level. Like if a child at school is getting bullied, a lot of adults now know to ask, I wonder what's happening to that bully at home.
Right.
Like where are they learning this?
Right.
But I'd never thought about it for like white people. Like
a group,
where was this learned?
Yes.
And then brought here and then, you know, calcified, put together and turned against social construction of racism.
Right,
you know?
right.
Like all of that, that was pretty mind-blowing for me as well. I think another thing that has stood out to me that I had, you know, I think what I love so much about the book is there are observations that maybe you just, I've noticed that, but you don't necessarily know where it comes from or what it is. So like I've noticed an observation, we have a dog, and typically when black friends come to our house, they don't like our dog. Now, a lot of times I don't like our dog either, but and I've just noticed that it's not always true across the board. Of course, there's black folk who have dogs, so it's not always true, but I have made that observation before, and he really unpacks like the history of that, not only of, you know, in the civil rights era where dogs getting turned on black people and black bodies, but also all the way into slavery and enslavement where dogs are used to hunt people, humans, and how that can get passed down where kind of from my grandmother's hands, you're a child, young little black boy or girl, and you're holding your mom's grandmother's hand, and there's a dog across the street, and she just squeezes your hand. She might not say anything. She might not say, be afraid. She's not necessarily telling you cognitively, I'm going to teach you to fear, but as a child, you feel fear in your body, and then you respond, and then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, you have this fear that but it's not out of nowhere.
But it's not your fear.
And it's not your fear. It's just passed down. And that, I think, for me, was just a very concrete example of how racism carries on in how it impacts a black body in a hugely significant way. Yet we might say, well, that's not so someone's afraid of a dog, no big deal. But when you really trace that, so I think that really was helpful. And then I think I would also add, just being someone who grew up in Christian church, there's such a separation, oftentimes, at least in the tradition I grew up in, between my body and my spirit. And body is often seen as bad and negative, and body is going to be about lust and going to be about sinful things.
The flesh.
Yes. As opposed to like, wait a minute, God made our body. And why are we put into this body? And what if we could actually learn to pay attention to it and listen to what our body is telling us? And that's pretty significant for me. So I'm someone who has stomach issues, and I've, always just told, well, that's just a physical thing. And now I know so much more of how that's connected to trauma, how that's connected to so many different things. And so I just really appreciate, I know he's not necessarily coming from a real faith perspective, but yet he is, because it's so spiritual.
It's so spiritual.
And it's connecting our spirituality with our bodies. And I feel like the book has made me better spiritually.
But it also speaks to the capacity of what the healing of a body can do to the healing of a spirit.
Yes.
and that the fear that grandma felt when she saw a dog and held your hand, like that you can feel that in your body, and you felt that in her body, in your body. She's the person that you trust the most, and who is not scared of anything, right?
Right.
She's never scared, but now she is. Wait a minute, I should have some of that. But then also, how do I then work around it? I think for me, the other piece that I was going to go to, for me that stood out was how he talked through the, I forgot how he called it, but saying that white fragility is not a thing, like the lie of white fragility.
Right.
But that the white fragility being a way in which white people say that they're afraid that all of the fear is put into black bodies, so they need to be afraid of black bodies. However, so they police, watch, and do all of that, yet it is the responsibility of black people and black bodies to then make white people feel comfortable.
Right.
So it's this weird balance that is happening. And I think the thing that stood out to me most is how often as black folks, we tend to make white people feel comfortable in the way that we speak and what we talk about, how we carry ourselves. He told the story of a black man who wrote a book. I can't think of the name of the book or the name, but that he was a big black guy, dark-skinned guy, and when he walked down the street, he noticed that white women would clench their purses and white men would be afraid, and so he learned to whistle some classical, some European classical tune.
Right.
And that he would whistle it so that people would hear it, see him, and he wouldn't catch them off guard, because God forbid, red and black man just shows up. But he would whistle, and then in the process of the whistling, because it was a European tune, it would calm, he would calm the white people. And oftentimes, sometimes they would even whistle with him. And they would see, oh no, he's a good one. And he would do all of this work while like walking to work on a particular day, or that he wouldn't go into a particular building right after. There's all the things, because he is taking care of himself, taking care of them. And ultimately what it is not just to let them feel better, but to also, in the calming of white people, it keeps himself safe. He doesn't potentially end up dead or in a negative interaction. So that was really like, I never thought about how I may be participating in maintaining white fragility. Because I'm trying to make people feel safe, as opposed to just being myself and trusting white people's ability to soothe and calm themselves. And that was the thing that he said that he worked on, and he knows the risk of that. However, the need for not being responsible for other people's demise of him was important. Like that was really interesting.
Man. I feel like I'm reading the book again. It's good.
I was like, oh my goodness, this is good. So I've got a question.
All right.
Does it really? So we're doing this book study. We're going to start at September 11th, and we're going to do 7 sessions between September 11th and December 4th. Does it take 4 months to read this book?
If you do it right. I think if you do it how Resmaa intended it to be done.
Okay.
And I think because healing's not fast.
Ooh, that's good.
And trauma that is in your body that's deep, that you've never explored, or maybe you've scratched the surface on, but you know, similar to the Europeans coming up, they're just running from it. We just run from it, run from it. I think it does take time to really sit with it. And honestly, it's an, I don't want to say it's an easy read, because there's nothing easy about it. But in the sense of, you know, it's not a lot that we're asking of you to read each time, but I do think spreading it out is really helpful to make it more impactful, because there are things you'll be asked to like pay attention to your body over the next week or over the next 2 weeks and really reflect on that. And so I think it's helpful to really slow that down. So there's no like money back guarantee at the end of, you know, this time period you're gonna be healed of all trauma in your body, not at all. But I do think we can at least, because we're taking time with it, begin to scratch the surface towards some significant, at least the possibility of some healing.
Yeah, as you say, it's not hard reading. It's not academic reading. No. You don't need to know $1 million words, GRE type level things.
Right.
Any word that might halfway be difficult is automatically defined.
Right.
But what's interesting, he's talking about our vagus nerve, which is the nerve that ignites our fight or flight. And the fight or flight in any situation is not cognitive. It's not something you think of. It happens because if I am really in danger, I need to be able to react before I can think. It takes longer to think than it does to react.
Right.
And so he's taking the time to do that. But also I think the other piece for me as to why I was like, oh goodness, one, the book is thick. It's a lot of pages. But also it is a completely different paradigm for my understanding of racism and how white supremacy operates in society and in myself.
Yeah.
I think that Ibram X. Kendi does a really good job talking about how to be an anti-racist and how anybody can be racist, like all of that conceptual pieces, and that's good. However, this book does a thing where it is like, I'm gonna give you all this stuff, and a lot of stuff you already know, but I also want you to sit with it.
Right. It's the first book I've seen do that it gets in your body, literally.
Yes.
And there's a challenge to really let the questions, let the prompts really transform you. And you know, it's a lot less like go out and do. Those books are good, and that's necessary. There's changes that need to take place, but this one is more changes in you that you sit with. So.
And I realized we didn't explain why he named it My Grandmother's Hands.
Oh, well.
Well, I think it's in the first book, but he tells a story about his grandmother being the daughter of sharecroppers that picked cotton, and that as a little girl, as early as 4 years old, she would pull the piece of cotton out of the flower that would have thorns that would cut her hands. And over time, in order to be able to pick cotton, her hands had to create calluses that would stop them from bleeding. And so when he was a little boy, he would touch his grandmother's hands and, you know, want to know why her hands were so thick and so hard. And, you know, she was telling the story. But I think that's why this book takes so long to read too. Like it takes time to develop calluses on your hands. And so we have the callus on our body of racism that doesn't just harm Black people, but white folks as well. Like the process of living into and validating a racist society, even if you don't like racism, you benefit from it, right? And so doing that does a callus to your spirit. And so that same work to build it will be what will be needed to understand it and to get rid of it. And so
soften it.
Soften it, right? Think about soaking your feet, scrubbing your feet, all of those things. And so it takes time to build and it takes time to break it down. But it's worth the work.
Yeah. And a little shout out to Bill Withers.
Yes.
Grandma's Hands.
Grandma's Hands.
As well.
It's just absolutely amazing.
We haven't even mentioned that there's a whole section on blue bodies talking about police.
Correct.
And I think also taking time with this is because those are some sensitive areas.
Very much so.
Especially when you start, it's already hard enough, sometimes when it's a different race and you're like, okay, I'm gonna have to build empathy towards, I don't know if I wanna do that. But then you add a police body on top of that and the trauma that anyone in the book study who comes may have in their own body, and it's hard. And so I think we just need to be gracious with ourselves and give ourselves that time.
Yes, because what he talks about is that being a police officer requires a socialization into a culture, a heightened culture of fear of Black bodies, that you're expected to shoot first. One of the things I heard for the first time while watching TV this week was, I'd rather be judged by 12 than carried by 6. I was watching something, The Shy, something, and they said that my husband was like, yeah, I've heard. I was like, what does that mean? He's like, 12 people on the jury or to be carried, and it was a cop who said that, and I was like, huh. But it's true if you really are afraid, and that's what he talks about, the actual fear that's in the body of blue bodies, of police officers, but it's fear that is very much so taught.
Right.
And just because it's real does not mean that just because you feel, you have the sensation of fear doesn't mean that you're actually in danger.
Right. And I think with their training that's becoming more militarized,
yes,
you know, a military body needs to be on alert, especially if they're in action. Pretty much 90, I mean, that was in the book.
Yeah,
he talked about 90% of your day, except maybe 10%, you don't have to be on alert.
Right.
And police, it should be the opposite.
Yeah.
Where it's like really only 10% you're on alert.
Yeah.
90% you're relaxed. And that is changing. And I think what that is doing to police bodies, that is trauma. It's not good for them. And so I think that's what I really appreciate about the book is racism is bad for all of us. It's bad for all of our bodies. It's bad for police bodies, for black bodies, for white bodies. And I think if we don't pay attention to that trauma we're carrying in our body, we just keep perpetuating the same pain and violence and fear.
And oftentimes, I believe that oftentimes we're trying not to do it.
Right.
But because we're not being intentional about healing that, or even realizing that we're sick.
Yeah.
Like I think we think that racism is like, it's an idea. So you know what?
Yeah.
I'm not going to be racist.
Yeah. You ask a fish, what's water? There's like, they don't even know it's there, but it's there. And
yeah, so that's definitely, okay. I think that was.
There was one other question, but it was why do it together? Why not just read this book on your own?
Yes, that was the last question. Why not read this book on your own? So for me, because I like to talk to people, this is something that I have taken numerous African American studies courses in undergrad. I took Black history, Black church studies, all these things in graduate school. I love a good Black documentary, and I mean it in the most broadest sense of like Black music, food, anything. I'm gonna watch it, but this one requires conversation. And also what I like about what we are planning to do is that it will be a interracial group that will spend time together actually in this room, but also we'll have an opportunity for us to split into different groups, because the biggest reason, one of the biggest issues with trying to fix racism is that the fear of, I hate this word, the fear of being canceled, like the fear of asking questions.
Right.
And so being able to be in a space that is empathetic, that is caring, that holds you accountable, but allows for the difficult questions to be asked.
Well, and a space that doesn't force your body to then care for my body.
Correct.
When white woman tears come or whatever the case may be. And so I think having those separate spaces really, I hope, will bless your body and will bless my body, but then also come together in healthy ways too. So
Correct.
I think it's a both and.
Yeah, it's definitely a both and, but there's something, because the other piece of it is that racism is also experienced communally. That the hierarchy of white supremacy was created by white people, not white persons, but like white people. So white people need to do the work to dismantle that.
Right.
Must learn how to have conversations with other white people about it. And I think that's in ways that I feel like Black folks have race conversation all the time. I don't know if y'all have
not
race
enough.
Not enough.
No, not enough. Very whispered. Can I say this? Is this so? You know, the enemy of niceness is keeps us from being real.
Yeah.
Often. And the uncomfortableness.
Yes.
And the confession required, and the repentance and the action required. And so there's a whole lot. There's a whole lot there.
Because in this, he talks about clean pain and dirty pain. And he talks about that healing requires pain. It hurts.
Yeah.
But you've got to go through it. Oftentimes we try to avoid pain.
Yeah.
And so we choose dirty pain, whether it is to ignore it, to send it someplace else. And so in this, it gives us an opportunity to experience a collective clean pain, hopefully, that will be healing and regenerative, as opposed to something that perpetuates and harms.
Right.
And yeah, definitely.
Yeah. No, I think at least my white German culture would say, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But I would say back to that, it's just not broke for you. So we've got to get back into it.
Correct.
And really do the hard work. So I also want to do it together with others, because I do know my tendency to get to those practices and just go through them quickly. And I think we will have time as a group collectively to actually sit and have a guided, grounding time to really sit with it. And I think I need that accountability.
I laugh because as clergy, I know so much of like when we're in like religious spaces, we do these rituals.
Yeah, yeah.
As a part of our being together, right? But at the same time, like if I'm by myself, I don't know if I'm going to do it all the way.
Right.
But if I'm going to be, that's the benefit of being in a space. Also, it's the reason why we're going to do this one, the December 4th gathering, because it'll be an opportunity to see what was it like to have Thanksgiving after reading this book.
Yeah. How did your body show up at the Thanksgiving table in the room you potentially, maybe for those who do see family, in the room maybe you grew up with, or with friends, chosen family around you, and what does that
feel like?
Yeah.
And how do you show up differently or not?
Yeah.
And what changes in that moment? Yeah. I'm excited.
I'm excited. And I do have to give one plug for the food.
Oh, okay.
Because, there's like, I would say heavy hors d'oeuvres. I don't know.
Scarritt
Bennett doesn't play with food. It's good. It's good. So
yes,
that's also a side benefit. That's not why I'm showing up, but
that in the process, that some of you can have a little nervous eating of good things.
Yes, very good.
Very good things. But we really hope that you will join us here at Scarritt Bennett Center in Scarritt Parlor. Starting September 11th, going through December 4th. We hope that you could join us, that you would be able to attend all 7 sessions. We know that sometimes that's not all possible, but I think it would be a really powerful for ourselves, for healing our bodies, healing our families, and our communities as a result. And if you're interested, hope you would register. Go to our website for the registration link. It's a pretty, but not bad at all when I think what it's worth and all. So we thank you for joining us for Java and Justice. Thank you, Dori.
Thank you.
Reverend Dori.
Oh, well, thank you, Reverend Kelli.
Thank you for participating with us, and we hope to see you all very soon.